Archaeologists entered Great Smoky Mountains National Park, searching for something buried. Not giants, not lost Europeans, not an underground empire. They were testing a century-old belief that these mountains were too steep, remote, and unforgiving for permanent native life. Then, in 2010, Cherokee students uncovered a 10th-century ancestral home. Post holes, storage pits, hearths, pottery. Not a hunting camp. A home. So did scientists discover a lost race of ancient builders? No. They discovered something far more important. Cherokee ancestors had lived deep inside these mountains and understood them better than modern archaeology did for nearly a century. This channel uncovers the ancient American history buried beneath familiar ground. Lost towns, erased nations, discoveries that rewrite the map. Subscribe, because the Smokies are only beginning to reveal what they remember. The Great Smoky Mountains are not one mountain, and they are not one archaeological site. They are a vast Appalachian maze of steep coves, mist-covered ridges, river valleys, and hidden limestone. To tourists, it looks like untouched wilderness. To archaeologists, it revealed something far more unsettling. The map was wrong. For decades, scholars believed the High Smokies were too cold, steep, and isolated for permanent native settlement. Then the evidence refused to cooperate. Human activity here stretches back roughly 10,000 years. And in 2010, Cherokee students uncovered something the old theory could not explain. A 10th-century ancestral Cherokee house inside the national park. Not a temporary camp. A house. Post holes marked the structure. Storage pits held food and supplies. Pottery pointed to daily life. That single discovery changed the entire story. The Smokies were not empty mountains waiting to be found. They were lived in, built on, remembered. And beneath them, more evidence was still waiting. Tools, pottery, hearths, ceremonial objects, and ancient mineral roots. But the Smokies were only one piece of a much larger system. Across the Appalachians, ancient rivers cut through mineral-rich mountains, and indigenous communities turned those resources into power. Copper was cold-hammered into breastplates, ear spools, and ceremonial headdresses, then traded across vast Mississippian networks. And the mountain communities were not isolated. At Sevierville, the McMahon Indian Mound stood beside the Little Pigeon River as part of a major village complex. Burials, pottery, shell jewelry, a marble pipe, monumental earthworks. All connected the Smokies to a wider world of trade, ceremony, and political power. So the real shock is not that ancient people built here. It is how connected everything was. Mountain homes, valley mounds, copper industries, coastal goods. The Smokies were not the edge of civilization. They were part of its network. These were not anonymous, ancient builders. They were ancestral Cherokee communities, and their descendants are still here. The 10th-century house proves people lived deep inside the Smokies. Post holes, storage pits, hearths, pottery, tools. The remains of everyday life in a place outsiders dismissed as empty wilderness. But Cherokee knowledge went beyond survival. Stories marked dangerous ground, protected sacred places, guarded ceremonies from those who had no right to witness them. The Wampus cat warned against violating sacred rites. Spearfinger warned children away from deadly mountain depths. These were not primitive superstitions. They were law, safety, ceremony, memory. And once that knowledge was ignored, the story turned into displacement, theft, and erasure. By the time archaeology began correcting the record, much of the damage was already done. Indigenous remains had been dug up, catalogued, and treated as research material. Now, under NAGPRA, institutions are being forced to return what they took. Ancestral remains from Sevierville, Sweetwater Island, and Lenoir City have been repatriated with funerary objects, worked bone, shell ornaments, and ceramic vessels. This is what the giant stories erase. They turn grave into rumors, chiefs into monsters, native engineering into a mystery only outsiders can solve. But the real scandal was never a secret vault. It was that indigenous history was taken from the ground, renamed, and separated from the people it belonged to. None of this survives in the viral version. The videos keep the giants, the tunnels, the forbidden zones, because fantasy is easier to sell than sovereignty. But that omission reveals the truth. The builders were never missing. Their names were, their laws were, their descendants were. The Moon-Eyed People story did not begin with scientists uncovering skeletons. It began with an 18th-century writer, Benjamin Smith Barton. He recorded a Cherokee tradition about a strange people in the southern Appalachians. Jord, pale, cave-dwelling, unable to tolerate bright light. The story was already mysterious. Then later writers transformed it. They stripped it from indigenous memory and forced it into a European legend. By the 19th century, the Moon-Eyed People had become part of the mound builder myth, the racist claim that native people could not have built America's earthworks. Suddenly, they were Welsh colonists from Prince Madoc's supposed 1170 voyage. And Fort Mountain's 885-foot wall became their proof. But archaeology tells a different story. The wall was built by Native Americans between 500 and 1500 CE. The real mythmaker was not one man. It was a colonial refusal to believe indigenous people built anything extraordinary. Strip away the legend, and the evidence is clear. No Welsh colonists built Fort Mountain. No Pale Cave race ruled the Smokies. No verified giant skeletons were hidden by federal agents. What archaeology actually shows is more powerful. Native construction, native ceremonial landscapes, Mississippian leaders buried with objects outsiders misunderstood. The cover-up story survives because it offers an easier answer. Giants built it. Europeans built it. Anyone but indigenous people. Because the truth is harder to dismiss. Native civilizations were already complex enough to build it themselves. Here is the strangest twist. The Smokies really do hide pale creatures beneath the mountains. Just not people. Cave crayfish, salamanders, animals shaped by total darkness until pigment and even eyesight became useless. Folklore imagined a hidden race beneath the peaks. Biology found something quieter, older, and somehow more unsettling. But the real mystery is not whether the Moon-Eyed People were Welsh. Archaeology already killed that theory. The harder question is this: what was the original Cherokee story trying to preserve? One theory links it to the Adena, an ancient mound-building culture whose priests tracked the night sky. Others see a memory of migration, conflict, or displacement between indigenous groups. Because oral history does not always preserve events like a written report. It compresses them. A light-sensitive cave people could have represented another population. A secret ceremonial society. Night-focused ritual specialists. Or enemies transformed by metaphor. That is what viral videos cannot package neatly. The fake European answer is easy to destroy. But the original indigenous meaning passed through colonial writers, pseudo-history, and internet myth. And somewhere along the way, it was changed into something else. The Smokies feel haunted for a reason. Not because something supernatural is beneath them. Because something real is. Caves, underground rivers, limestone chambers hidden inside the mountains. For generations, stories described a dark world beneath the ridges. Modern geology did not find an underground empire. It found a real underworld. Inside it live animals built for permanent darkness. Pale bodies, reduced eyes, no need for sight. And then there are the bats, thousands pouring from hidden chambers at dusk. Which means massive spaces exist below the surface, spaces most people will never see. So no, the Smokies are not hiding giants in tunnels. They are hiding a living underground world that swallows water, sound, light, and certainty. This is where everything connects. The Cherokee and earlier indigenous communities did not need giants to make the Smokies extraordinary. They had something more powerful. Knowledge. They knew which ridges could hold homes through winter, which plants pointed to water, which caves breathed, which stories kept children away from deadly places, which ceremonies had to remain protected. Modern science is not replacing that knowledge. It is arriving late. Post holes, storage pits, pottery, and hearths prove people lived where scholars expected only temporary camps. Cave species and bat colonies prove the hidden world beneath the mountains was real. The people erased from the official story may have understood the Smokies better than the institutions that later dug up their history and called the correction a discovery. The myth gave us giants, tunnels, and cover-ups. The truth gave us something stranger. Cherokee homes, mound networks, underground ecosystems. Ancestors finally returned to their people. If this changed how you see the Smokies, subscribe. Because the real history is always buried deeper. Thanks for watching.